After the buzzer for a June Wednesday in the aftermath of an epic basketball game the other night, which we're going to have to talk about even though it's been beaten to death by every podcast and every pundit in America and perhaps beyond. Our guest to start out is, you may remember her from the Philadelphia Daily News, ESPN.com, now senior writer for The Athletic, covering college hoops. Dana O'Neill, welcome to the big broadcast.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure.
Tell me about Kyle Lowry. I watch Kyle Lowry. I see so many things. I just want to talk a little bit about Kyle because you wrote that excellent piece about him the other day. I think he's sort of an erratic player, but he does a lot of things. It's an unusual combination of strengths and weaknesses, I think, with him. When you watch him actually play in the court, what do you see and see? That's Philly. That's kind of the Philly in him coming out on the court.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think Kyle has personified Philly basketball since I've known him, since he was a freshman in college.
Mm-hmm.
He just kind of lives it and breathes it. And I think what that is, and I think it does, you're saying that he's erratic, I think that's part of it, because he wants to win so badly, and he plays so hard and plays so tough. And sometimes I think he's like, his body gets ahead of his brain, or his will to win gets ahead of his brain a little bit. So you might see some mistakes and then see some things that are erratic, and maybe not as fluid as you might like, but he just wants so badly to do everything. I think sometimes he feels like he's going to try to do it all, and that's why he becomes erratic. But that's, to me, just the personification of a Philly guard. I will do whatever I have to do. You know, when he was in college, he was not the biggest dude on the court, and he would fly down the lane and get beat up, and he didn't care. And that's who Kyle Lowry has always been.
I guess the thing about Kyle, when he was at Villanova in 04, 05, and 05, 06, is he was kind of not necessarily the main guy. You know, Alan Ray and Randy Foye.
That's
and,
right.
And Jay was playing four guards, Mike Nardi being the fourth of those. But it's interesting to me, too, that there were a couple situations where, he's a 33-year-old man now deep into his career, and he kind of really showed his growth as a person. I found myself chuckling a little bit as to how 20-year-old Kyle would have handled it when the fan pushed him in the front row. What's your take on that?
Yeah, no, I think I texted with Dave Distel, his high school coach, about that very thing. Look, those of us who remember Kyle fondly and lovingly from his college days, remember he was a handful. Jay Wright kind of took him knowing he needed somebody with an edge, but also recognizing that he was going to get a lot of pushback and a kid that needed to grow up. I think the reason Villanova worked for him was because he was surrounded with Randy Foye and Alan Ray and these quality guys who weren't going to let him be a jerk necessarily. But,
right.
Look, if I was held responsible for who I was at 20 versus who I am today, I'm hopefully a better, different, more mature person. So I guess we shouldn't be surprised that Kyle is. But, he's completely different.
So a whole different podcast. Dana O'Neill, the dark side of Penn State.
Let's rip the lid off that for one.
Absolutely. That's like that 20-part series. We'll go into
that. All right. And the other thing was when Durant got hurt the other night, and the Toronto fans sort of had this awful knee-jerk reaction to cheer it. Kyle was one of those guys who immediately started gesturing like, "What are you doing?
Yeah.
Knock it off!"
That didn't surprise me at all. Actually, that did not surprise me.
Well, yeah, I can see. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for all the things all of the problems and foibles that Kyle had as a kid, or whatever you want to say, he was always a pretty darn good teammate, and he always respected the game and respects players.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I think was cool wasn't that even though so much that he did it, it was that the fans listened.
Mm-hmm.
When they did that, the fans were like, "Oh, okay, they're telling us we're acting like jerks. We're going to knock it off here." So, because that was pretty nasty. Of course, we all think of Michael Urban here, right? I mean, same situation.
Sure.
I thought that was a really classy move by Kyle, and at least it's crappy that the fans did that, but at least they listened and improved their behavior.
Yeah, I mean that was pretty troubling. My reaction to that was it was kind of karmic when they ended up losing the way they did.
I think a lot of people thought that too. It's like you set yourself up. It's just people are so competitive, and you guys know. Between social media and everything else, like being nasty and mean-spirited is like in vogue these days. And I think sometimes people don't think.
Yeah.
And it's like, what do you, I mean, I think, if you want to go deep into the psyche, people were saying, well, they were just cheering that they had a chance to win. I'm like, yeah, but they're still cheering the fact that like one of the transcendent players of all time is on the ground with a clearly serious injury. I mean, that's just horrible, no matter how you slice it.
It's funny because it really was like almost like a group think thing because people reacted so horribly, and then I think they pretty quickly figured out, Jesus, we just reacted horribly, and they kind of bounced back in a group way, which is weird.
It's also kind of a Canadian thing. The interesting reaction, I guess Steph Curry was asked about it yesterday, and speaking of people who just get it, and of course he lived in Toronto for a time when Dell played for the Raptors, and basically in his answer he said, well, this isn't the people I know here, and hopefully that was just a little glitch, and which is kind of a very Steph Curry way to handle this, I think.
Yes. I thought he gave a great answer actually to that question because he chastised them gently. You know what I mean? Basically, like he didn't call them out and say you're jerks. He basically said these aren't the people I know, so knock it off because you're kind of ruining your reputation, which they did. Right. I mean, and like you said, I think people get caught up in the moment. One dude starts booing, cheering. Everybody starts cheering. We've all been around it, right? It's just you'd like to think that people would just think before they act, but that's an entirely 500-part series. So,
really. Dan, let's talk a little bit about this piece that you wrote and just Kyle's background and his childhood and everything. I actually saw a game at Scheid Park, which is then Connie Mack Stadium, which tells you how old I am. But this is a kid who grew up in the shadow of that ballpark. Tell the people who have not read your piece a little bit about formative years for Kyle.
Well, it's like one of these quirky Philadelphia stories, right? That only can happen in Philly. That the row house that Kyle grew up on in North Philly just happened to be across the street from Scheid Park. And back in the 1920s, long before Kyle Lowry was born, fans there sold admission into essentially their second floor windows and their rooftops to allow people to view over the right field wall, which is exceptionally short, and then eventually built bleachers on the roof so people could look into the ballpark for practically nothing. Eventually, the people got ticked off about that, and they built what they called the spite fence so people couldn't see over. So when Kyle's mom,
this is the owners of the A's did this, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So so when they built the spite fence in states, and they got bigger, and as things do. And when Kyle's mother grew up, she can remember living across the street from the gigantic wall. And so at that point, they were just like lucky if like a home run came over the fence, they might be able to sell that for a couple bucks at the bar down the street, she said. So Kyle was long after all of this history happened, but I just thought it was kind of that quirky sort of thing because I've always thought, like I said earlier, that Kyle personifies Philly in so many ways in his attitude and the ingenious capitalism of those people around bleachers on their roofs are also traditional Philly, and I just thought there was a kind of a neat little kind of correlation and just sort of what are the odds that some goofy little row home could have like kind of some pretty powerful moments in Philadelphia sports history, if you will. So it was just it's a quirky little thing. I had some fun with it, and Kyle's mom Marie was a good sport to kind of play along with me, to be honest with you.
It's great. I mean, I which to me is interesting just because you were immersed with Villanova back in 04, back in the early 2000s. So those ties remain, and you can draw on that experience, which is always sort of an interesting part of the writing process. Which is why you have beats to begin with, which maybe people don't understand. But
I tell college students all the time, the reason you cover a beat, like that knowledge doesn't go away. It only makes things better no matter. And I can't tell you, as you guys know, how many times in the last all this Villanova success lately that I've gone back to the well of what they did previously and how they developed and who Jay was and who he recruited and other people affiliated with the program. And Kyle has always been, the one thing you have to understand about him is he's fiercely loyal. If you're on Kyle's good side, you're in for life. And he's always been really good to me. I mean, I'll be sitting at a game and I won't know he's there, and he'll text me, I see you, come walk over here and say hello. And I'm like, okay. So I go over and I see him.
Nice.
And,
yeah.
When he donated money to Villanova, they had a little press conference, and I went down to cover it. My son had the day off because Martin Luther King Day. We bought tickets for the game later, and so Kyle spent like 15 minutes with my son. He had to do that. I mean, he's just a So he's a fiercely loyal guy, and but yeah, those old beat sources come in handy often.
Yeah. Yeah, nice to have those numbers still in your phone.
Absolutely, never delete a number. I never ever do. I just actually working on a Kevin Durant story right now, and I wrote something years ago when I talked to like his AAU coach, who was like a mentor to him, and I have his number, and I'm talking to him later tonight because it's like, oh my god, I still have the number. Go me, yeah.
Go you. You're so much more organized than I am, evidently.
iPhones help, man. iPhones help.
This is just something that college basketball has been your thing, Dana, for a long time. Are you worried about the future of it? Because the future of it, I'm worried about the future of it.
Well, I mean, yes and no. So, I think right now it's at a kind of pivotal crossroads with all this, the scandal. Certainly, I don't know if people have gotten as upset maybe as you might have thought they did with that, but I think the age limit stuff is really important. I think it's very important that people get their arms around what they want this to look like, right? Do you want guys who are kind of coming in college for a passer, a drive-by, and that's it? And if that's what you want, that's cool. Or don't you? And make the decision and kind of stick with it. I think that's the most important thing. I think the age limit's going to go away. I think that will clarify things a lot. I think the first couple of years we'll have a bazillion guys thinking that they can go pro, and then they'll learn the hard way that they can't. They'll be the guinea pigs, and then we'll start seeing some continuity in the college game. I'm not saying we'll see 4-year guys, but we might see 2- and 3-year guys. We might see the Dante DiVincenzo's who blow up. We might see guys, who stay 3 years. And I think that's what's got to happen. I think the college game right now, what drives me nuts is, and we're all guilty of it, is you watch a great player like Zion Williamson, and all anybody talks about is what can he do in the NBA? What kind of NBA prospect? From the minute he takes in the court, it's like, can we just take a time out and enjoy 6 months of his college career? And you can't, because everything is about the next, the next, the next. I'm hoping if they clarify that maybe then we can actually just enjoy a college basketball player as a college basketball player. That has been so devalued.
Impressively, Zion Williams seemed like he was able to enjoy it.
He was terrific, man. I mean, I love that kid. I started with them in Maui. I was down at the Maui tournament, and he could not have been a more delightful, decent human being, a great teammate who was having a blast, and he was in it, and he did not. And I will say, like, a lot of times, it's not the kids, it's the rest of us, like, putting it on them. They just want to play ball. They're not, crazy. Of course they want to make the NBA, but they get it. No, he was phenomenal. I thought. And so, I just hope, like, I did a story years ago featuring Scotty Reynolds and a bunch of other players who felt like they were failures if they didn't make it in the NBA. Because everything from the time you pick up a basketball is the NBA, the NBA. And being a great college ball player anymore is like, oh, well, big deal. Well, there still aren't very many of them out there. And there's guys playing, making money overseas. That's pretty impressive. But we just lost all of that. So I'm hoping we can get it back.
That's very interesting. So you're doing a Durant piece, and he had surgery on his right Achilles today, as you know. And what was your view about him? A, coming back, and B, just the aftermath of all that occurred.
Well, I mean, I first of all, I just felt horribly for him. I mean, that was my gut reaction. My God.
Yeah, I think, how could you not? How could you not?
Right? And look, I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to even pretend to play one. I don't know all the conversations. My husband's an athletic trainer at a university, so I know through him, how many T's are crossed and I's are dotted with, guys at Princeton. I got to think that the same procedure went with someone of the caliber of Kevin Durant, that there wasn't some pushback that by outsiders. If anybody pushed, it was Kevin Durant. I've known him a little bit over the years, not particularly well, but he's always been a guy who wants to play basketball. And for much as people were complaining that the calf injury, he was milking it, faking it, whatever you want to call it, I don't think he was.
No.
And I think he wanted to play, so if anybody pushed themselves back, it was him.
Yeah.
And, the only thing that struck me is, like, they were saying, like, well, the calf injury was cleared, and they didn't think there was any other risk of anything with an Achilles. I'm like, well, dude, I don't even know biology, but I know they're connected to one another. Like, it's not. My husband said, like, when the injury happened, he's like, well, there's a part of your calf and it runs down to your Achilles. So that part, like, didn't seem like a stretch to me, but I just think there was a guy who wanted to play in the NBA Finals, and unfortunately, that's what his body just said nope, and here we are.
Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see what he is when he comes back, which will be probably a year. because, Kobe came back pretty well. Dominique Wilkins came back pretty well. But then you have Elton Brand, who was not the player he was before the injury. So, it's in a lot of ways, it's worse than an ACL.
Oh, gosh. Anymore it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, ACL surgeries have come so far that, they're almost like no big deal anymore. But, an Achilles, from everything I've heard, is it's a full year. And, who knows? I mean, you just hope that, heaven knows we'll put the work in, and it's just a matter of how his body responds. None of us can predict that.
Well, what's the Durant piece going to be, and when are we going to see it? I mean, what's sort of the angle of it? Are you going to you're not going to get to talk to him, or are you?
No, God, no. Yeah, I'm just going to go hang out with him at the hospital.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
It's actually funny because I started thinking about. We were talking about doing this before the injury happened. Now we're trying to fast track it. When's it going to be done? It's TBD. But we did a piece. One of our writers did a piece on Kawhi Leonard, sort of like in his college years. They did a really cool oral history about who he was and kind of how he was formed and how he became who he is. And we wanted to do the same thing with Kevin. So I actually started making some phone calls from, again, phone numbers I had. Todd Wright, the Sixers strength coach, was Kevin Durant's strength coach back at Texas. So, started to make some phone calls to some people and seeing if I can kind of piece together sort of how he kind of came from this scrawny 17 and 18-year-old to who he is, and work in sort of, I think, hopefully an understanding of how he operates. I think that's part of the question that's been dogging him since his injury with the calf, is like who he is and how he operates and his dedication. And I'm hoping that by going backwards, people will get a better picture of, no, you're wrong, this is the dude he is.
Here's my question. How do you do this between, raising two kids and doing this? How do you divvy up your day?
Well, my kids are teenagers, so they don't even know if I'm in the house anymore. Let's be my daughter graduated from high school last night. She's like that. She's gone. She's so. But look, it's, you guys know, if you have kids, it's hard. It's you balance it out and you make it work and try not to miss the important things if you can't. And I pick and choose my spots about when to work and when to shut it down. And I don't know. It's just I don't know how you do it. I just like, what is my choice? This is my job, and those are my kids, so I can't.
Yeah, I think we might have. We might have flexibility that other people don't have in this context, right?
That's what I tell people all the time. So my girlfriends back in the day when the kids were little, 9 to 5, and they get home at 5:30. Their kids were like in after school care and all that stuff, and before school care. My thing was like, if I'm home, the good news, I'm home. Like I can get you off the bus, I can get you on the bus. So when I'm gone, like I'm far from away. Like I'm literally gone. So it cuts both ways. I used to, when they were little, try to shut it down between, get off the bus, get the homework done and all that stuff, and try to not take calls if I could. But, but they've grown. They don't know any different. They're used to it. And like I said, at this point, like really,
they don't even process it.
And they go sit down and go in their rooms.
They don't even.
They don't know.
I've talked to sometimes when I'm on the road, I'll call home and my kid will answer, and I'm in Iowa, and then he's talking to me for a few minutes, and I'll say, "Can we get Wendy's tonight? I'm in Iowa." I don't know.
My daughter is the one that will say, "I forgot where you are." Because here's the thing: they could play the Final Four in my driveway, and my daughter wouldn't watch. Like, she could care less. She just like college. She's not a big basketball fan. My son always knows because he's a sports fan. So his problem now is, can I come? Can I join you? Can I go?
Oh, well, that's neat. Yeah, that's nice that he wants to do that.
Yeah, he wants to go, but he just wants access. He wants good tickets. Let's
be
honest. He doesn't want to be with me. But yes, Madigan's the same way. Like, she'll basically just be completely oblivious as to where I am, why I'm there, and why anybody would care about that stupid basketball game.
Really? Well, anyway, I think you have a great gig. I think most people who follow this stuff, you're going around the country writing stories about college hoops. It's pretty cool. And as Dave Jones would say, you've been a delight.
Whenever you can end a conversation with a Dave Jones quote, I'm not sure if that's a good thing or it's a bad thing, but it's definitely a thing.
It's a thing. It's a thing. So anyway, we really appreciate you hanging out with us.
Anytime, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right, take care. Be well.
You too.
Well, that was fun.
Yes, of course.
I love her. And she does have a great gig. I've often thought that. When she was with ESPN and now, just knocking out those features and getting to see great basketball.
Yeah. And it's interesting to me, just the thought process that goes into what she does, about how it's like, oh yeah, Todd Wright, he was Kevin Durant's strength coach. I mean, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. You got to make those connections. I mean, we see that all the time, and she's really good at it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you can pick up a thread like that, I mean, those, as you well know, those are the people that tend to be the most interesting, that have the best insight into what makes these guys tick.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really interesting thread to pick up, and then a lot of times you get that guy, and that guy will say, well, what about this person or that person?
Yeah.
And then it kind of snowballs from there. So it's really kind of the process is interesting.
Yeah, the process is interesting at least it's interesting to us. I think it's interesting to other people too. Well, I hope so.
And it's challenging, and it's sometimes frustrating, but it is what it is.
It is what it is. How many times can we use that term? But we do want to talk about this basketball game, I think,
right,
because there were so many amazing things about it. The Durant injury, how does that change the NBA? What teams will give him a max deal and then let him sit for a year?
Apparently, there are 3 teams at least out there who are going to do it, and you would think it'd be like the Knicks, Nets, and maybe the Clippers, somebody like that.
Yeah, I think they will. I think the Knicks and Nets will.
Yeah,
those two.
Yeah,
I mean, I would if I was them. I mean,
yes.
I mean they're used to being horrendous. I mean,
so yeah. Well, the Nets are getting better at least.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. The Nets are.
And in fact, I thought they were a pretty entertaining team this year, and they gave the Sixers, quite a bit, even though it was a 5-game series. I thought that they
they're in some. I was listening to something the other day or reading something. They're in pretty good shape in terms of flexibility and cap space and all that stuff to make some moves and that's an interesting. I mean, that's not a bad place to be.
Yeah.
A lot of people are talking about Kyrie for them, which means that Russell's got to go, right? You would think they can't play together.
No, they cannot play together. I mean, because the one, I mean, this is strictly somebody throwing stuff against the wall, but they said, well, D'Angelo Russell will go to the Sixers.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, which is, I don't know. And then today there was a report that Tobias Harris and the Nets have mutual interest, because Tobias is from Long Island, and Kenny Atkinson's brother coached Tobias in high school.
Oh,
yada, 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 which I didn't know.
Yada.
So, that would be an interesting process. I mean, after I'd had a chance to ruminate on the whole Durant thing, I thought, as you did, what does this mean for free agency this summer? Well, apparently it won't change it too terribly much, because people are still going to go after Durant, still make a run at him.
Yeah.
With the promise that he'll be, hopefully as close as possible to what he was.
But it's amazing how much the NBA is going to change this offseason.
Yeah.
I mean, so many teams are going to dramatically change. And I think maybe the thing that the Durant injury impacts is that teams that are kind of sort of trying to win now, like I think the Lakers are under the delusion that we can get a free agent and make a run at it next year. Well, then you don't want Durant. If you're thinking in those terms, even if you're nuts to think in those terms.
Yeah, you got to think in short term because of LeBron's age. How much longer does he have? 2 more years, maybe?
I'm not sure that he was an option for them anyway, but I mean, he hasn't been talked about. But this sort of reminds me of the build up to the draft every year. We're sort of relying on what the experts are saying, like what the consensus is about.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But it will be interesting to see how things unfold and how the dominoes tumble. And I would think Jimmy Butler would be back. It's kind of disastrous if he doesn't come back for this. They traded their 2 starting forwards to get him, and he obviously was he was very good in the playoffs. He was what you would hope he would be. On the other hand, he had a reputation and still has a reputation of not always playing well with others. And a quote sticks in my mind from a story that Bob Ford of the Inquirer wrote when they brought Jimmy in, that the nameless NBA person said that once he gets his money, he'll be a pain in the ass. Which was,
oh boy, that's wonderful to hear.
But the Sixers, as a team, they have 10 free agents. July 1, beyond Butler and Harris, there's also J.J. Redick, who I would think would be, he said he wants to come back and they have interest, but, JJ being JJ said he also understands that he's not the top priority. So, as with everything that he does, he's being an adult about it.
Well, he was making $12 million.
Yeah.
He might have to take 10 or something like that. I mean, he might have to make it fit, to make it all work.
Yeah.
You have there's salary cap considerations. If you let Butler walk, you're not going to replace him. Probably,
No.
You're probably not going to replace him. I mean,
Probably not.
If they let Butler walk? I don't even know this. If they let Butler walk, let's say, are they in the hunt for some of these other guys? Are they in the hunt for Kyrie? Are they in the hunt? They're not for.
I can't imagine.
No,
that.
I mean,
they can give Butler more than anybody else can give him. They can give him $190 million over 5 years, which is a big chunk of change. Now, at the end of that, he'll be 34, I believe.
Yeah.
And he tends to miss time every year anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure part of that is because of how hard he plays.
But I think you have to do that.
Yes.
I think
you do.
I mean, I don't think you cannot do that because of the 5 years.
Yes.
I guess that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think you have to do it.
Yeah.
And the other part of this, beyond the free agent thing, is that Ben Simmons is going to be up next year.
Yeah.
So they're going to have to decide what they want to do there. I mean, he's one of those lightning rod guys. On one hand, he has a lot of special abilities, but shooting is not one of them. And we are in an era now where shooting is a huge consideration.
Well, he's going to have to figure that out.
And yet he seems kind of resistant to it. Which is,
they say he puts time into it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, you see it every now and then. Somebody will run a clip of him shooting threes before a game. Well before the game, before the fans are even there. And his form actually looks okay.
Yeah.
And he makes shots, but he very seldom shoots them in a game. And
he's probably conscious of keeping the elbow in that situation in a way that you can't quite be when you're actually in the middle of playing the game.
Yeah. So let's say, just for the purposes of argument, that they do bring D'Angelo Russell in. Does that mean Simmons is now your small forward?
Well, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. It's not just the money and making it. It's what do you do in terms of player development with Ben Simmons going forward? Do you make him a 4?
I don't know.
Going forward,
he's pretty good at it.
Yeah,
I mean, he showed this year that he's a pretty good defender, and of course, we know about his passing and ball handling. He's very good at that, and just how he can push the ball and create a tempo by himself.
Yeah. He really is good at that.
Yeah.
But that's sort of a regular season phenomenon to some extent, though.
Fair.
Fair. That's something
fair,
that happens.
Very fair.
Yeah.
No.
And there's 10, 12 teams in the NBA that are having this nuanced and multi-dimensional discussion right now. You know?
Sure. And Boston, the Nets, the New Orleans, the Lakers, the Warriors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
It's pretty neat.
Yeah.
That New Orleans got Zion.
Yes.
That's pretty neat. That makes things
that.
a lot more interesting.
Yeah, and so now they have to decide what they're going to get for Anthony Davis, and they have a new GM in David Griffin. He's a seasoned guy who will not get fleeced, I wouldn't think. I mean, you would think that, for instance, if he traded him to Boston, he could get, pretty good package,
Yeah, but I don't know if you're going to get 85 cents on the dollar.
Well, we know that very well here in our area. The Wilt trade, the Moses trade, the Charles, all those. You never get value for those guys, for guys like that. But it's if they want out, you got to just cut your losses and move on.
Are you absolutely certain that he wants out? Are you going to keep him until trade deadline during the season and try to convince him that?
Will his value be greater in February than it is now? I question that, because then you're sort of forced to trade him, aren't you? Because now he's like,
if he
4 months away from his contract being up.
Yeah, that's right. But are you going to roll the dice and say, I love this situation with Drew Holiday and Zion Williams, and then I want to be there?
Boy, I would love to see that team play.
I would too.
I think that'd be a hell of a lot of fun.
I love it. I mean, is it possible for him to get in a better team situation next year than that one?
I can't imagine.
Not many.
Maybe Boston.
Yeah, maybe
Boston would be really
maybe
good.
Boston, but Boston's going to be giving up some pieces. But they have a lot of pieces.
They have a lot of. In fact, if they showed anything this past year, they had too many pieces.
Yeah,
it's like they were kind of like tripping over each other in some. So it's like you probably get Jason Tatum, maybe like Marcus Smart, and fill in the blank.
Yeah, right.
I don't know who you get beyond it, but I mean that would be a hell of a team.
Yeah, it's interesting. So anyway, nobody knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's nobody. It's not like we're not smart enough to figure this out. Nobody's smart enough to figure this out. It's just crazy shit that's going to happen in the next couple of months in the NBA. Now let's talk. The other thing that happened the other night was just this basketball game. This amazing basketball game.
It was that.
Which was, first of all, before Durant got hurt, it was an unbelievably high level of play.
Oh my God!
It was just amazing.
Yes.
The Warriors shooting the lights out from three and not getting up 15.
No,
despite it.
Because that's the thing that people have emphasized with this edition of the Warriors, that kind of their dirty little secret the last couple of years is they were a hell of a defensive team, and they're not that anymore.
Yeah.
And
they have moments, but they're not. Not. You're right. They're not.
And then it's like Toronto kept on running pick and roll and getting great stuff out of it. And then, but it was fun to watch the Warriors be the Warriors, even if it was only for 12 minutes, because it was like, okay, we got our guy back. Now let's play how we play.
Yeah.
And it was just, so fun to watch them being like that.
And interesting the way they used Durant, because I didn't think Durant was all that active offensively. He kind of played the Harrison Barnes role, but just better than Harrison Barnes.
Right.
But there were times when he was engaged with Kawhi on the other end. It was like he was more physically active on the defensive end, and they played him a lot of minutes too. They apparently were going to play him 40 minutes, which that is a whole issue.
Well, and that's an interesting point, because Brian Windhorst, I've seen him interviewed a couple times. ESPN's guy, he's kind of the LeBron guy, but he's also the general NBA guy. He was talking about how last summer the Warriors signed Cousins when they probably should have signed another wing. Just to take pressure off those guys, to play some of those down minutes, and they didn't. And of course, it kind of blew up on him, because in the Houston series, I think by his number, Durant was averaging some ridiculous number of minutes, like in the 40s.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
So, and he was playing great. I mean, he was the best player in the playoffs for the first couple rounds.
Yeah, they really rode him hard, though.
They did.
That's fair to say.
So his Windhorst's point in a way was that, when Bob Myers kind of, softly fell on his sword the other night and said, if you want to blame anybody, blame me, then in a way it was his fault,
Well, yeah, arguably.
Because their bench is terrible. They don't have much there.
Did Cousins hurt? Did his contract hurt them enough that they didn't have flexibility? I can't really.
As I recall, it kind of did. They had like one slot where they could sign a significant guy, and because he was coming off injury, an Achilles injury of his own, they could fit him in, but they couldn't fit anybody else in. So now you're down.
And how erratic is he too? I mean, there's times when he looks like he can't run.
No.
And then how about that stretch of just a minute or so, he had an offensive goaltend, and that illegal screen, which
well, that's a pet peeve of mine, because I don't know how you call an illegal screen in the NBA, much less at that point in the game, because to me every screen in the NBA is illegal.
Well, I disagree with you a little bit about that. Okay. I honestly, but I think the consensus is with you. I've listened to a lot of analysis in the last couple of days, and a lot of people whose opinion I respect have said what you said. They couldn't believe that they couldn't believe they called it. I thought that was sort of a hip check. I thought that was so. and clearly gained advantage from it. And I'm generally of the school that you call the game the same way in the last minute as the first minute. I mean,
fair.
So, but again. A lot of people who I like in our business have vehemently agreed with you about that. I can't effing believe they called that in that situation. So
and then it comes down to the Warriors playing great defense on the last possession. Yeah. I mean, Andre Iguodala left Kyle Lowry to go double Kawhi, getting the ball out, which is what you absolutely have to do.
Yep. Couple things. Would it have been better for them to get him the ball coming off a screen and moving a little bit?
Fair.
So then you call timeout and run a sideline out. Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe.
He was right in the middle of the court so that both Iggy and Draymond could kind of read it.
Yeah.
Kind of read and they both did,
Yeah, two veteran guys making a really, I don't know if it was planned, but it was certainly a good instinctive play. So now Iguodala swings it to Van Vliet on the wing. And then to Lowry, wide open for a corner three, which is the shot that everybody wants. And at the time, I didn't realize it, but Draymond apparently came flying at him and got a hand on it, which is just what he does.
Yeah, I was just listening to a podcast while I was driving down here, and it was Zach Lowe's, and it was right after the game, and they were watching. They were like on the floor doing his podcast, and they were looking at some Canadian TV and it was pretty conclusive. They said that he got a hand on it.
Yeah, and that's an unbelievable play.
Yeah,
because he came a long way to get it. That's, normally, with that kind of spacing, you don't get anybody anywhere near that. So, initially it looked like Kyle just gagged on the shot, but that wasn't the case at all. It was just Draymond being Draymond.
And even if he didn't touch it, he's shooting it here. He's shooting it right-handed, and Draymond's like flying over the top of that. That's, if you think about being a shooter, and that was a really good contest.
So it was, and the other, I guess, the juncture that's talked about a lot is Nick Nurse calling a timeout. When his team had all the momentum, up 6 with 3 minutes to play, and it kind of, I guess his rationale was in two parts. A, Kawhi was gassed because he just basically looked like he just won him the game, won him the championship, and B, If you keep those 2 timeouts under 3 minutes, you lose. And, well, to me, that's not even a consideration. Yeah. The championship is right there. It's right there.
Yeah, I couldn't. I heard his post game, and I couldn't believe he said that.
Who cares about that? You're about to win the championship.
Yeah, I thought he said, I thought we were tired. I thought if he would have also said, I thought Kawhi in particular was gassed, and he had just gone ballistic for a couple of minutes.
Oh, my God.
That would have been a better argument for his case, I thought.
So anyway, now you give Golden State life. They outscored him 9-2 after that. I mean, Thompson, Curry, Thompson with 3 threes. I mean, the game-winning 3 by Thompson was just a thing of beauty. Curry drives the baseline, throws it to Iguodala under the rim. They react to him. He kicks it out to Draymond on the right wing. Draymond swings it over to Thompson. Thompson up fakes Kawhi flying at him, has a wide open shot. Well, he's going to make that 8 times out of 10. They are
still better than anybody's ever been at playing this sort of outside-in basketball, arranged around half-court offense around the 3-point arc. If you watch that play, Kawhi, who's one of the best defensive players in the world, he hedged too far. When the ball was down here, he hedged too far, and he was almost right under the basket.
Yes, he was.
So he had to just out-of-control fly at Thompson, ball fake, step over here, make a 3. And the other, the one that Steph made was another good example of that because he comes around the screen. It was actually the same screen that Boogie got called for an illegal
same set,
and he beat whoever was guarding him. It might have been Danny Green, whoever it was.
It might have been Van Vliet, but whatever. Go ahead.
But if you watch that play, he runs 10, 12 feet on a straight line to the spot on the arc where he wanted to shoot the ball. The space from the screen to where he actually shot it was like 10, 12 feet. It's a subtle thing, but a lot of guys would have, I turned the corner here and beat this guy. I'm just going to jump behind the arc and catch it. You know what I mean? He went straight to where he wanted to shoot. This
is what I love about the NBA. Well, one of the many things is just like these guys make hard things look really easy.
Yeah.
He caught that thing, stopped on a dime, and released it. It was ridiculous.
That was really people don't. He's better without the ball than with it. I'm now convinced of that. As good as his handle is, because sometimes he gets carried away with the handle. He has too much confidence in it. Plus, he's small, and when they double team him,
he gets swallowed up. Yeah, that's fair. I guess part of that was he was more off the ball in college, if I recall, than he was on.
Yeah, remember, he stayed another year so he could prove that he was a point guard. That was really like an old school motion offense at Davidson, and he would run around and run off screens.
So the other part of that shot, Curry isn't making anything the whole half. He looks like he's gassed. Everything's up short. And then he still has the confidence and the legs or whatever, to make that shot in that spot. I mean, it's only the championship on the line. Don't worry about it. No pressure.
He's really, in addition to being a phenomenally great player, he's a really unusual player. He just seems like he's flowing along out there like there's a casual thing to his game, sometimes to a fault almost. Yeah. He makes some mistakes because of that, but... man, he's got guts.
I think people underestimate him to a degree too because he looks like he's 15. They underestimate his competitiveness and just how hard he. hard playing he is.
He gets a lot of grief on Facebook, and not that matters. Who cares? It's idiots on Facebook. But I think part of it is people almost think basketball is like a playground game. Like, could he beat Westbrook 1-on-1? I think that's how people think. You know what I mean? He couldn't be.
Who cares?
Yeah, who cares? But people do care.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of could he beat Damian Lillard 1-on-1? I mean, I think people think that he's not tough somehow, and
I think he's very tough.
Yeah,
I think
they're wrong. Those people are wrong.
Yes, I just think I love watching the guy play. I really do. And now, all that said, I have a hard time seeing them win Game 6 because I just don't think they have the bullets.
I still don't think they're going to win. Yeah, and you remember now Looney is hurt too.
Yeah,
and he was. I thought it looked pretty courageous.
Yes.
Of him to be playing at all.
He was pretty much grimacing the whole time.
Oh my God!
And I like him a lot. He's a perfect player for their team because he doesn't need the ball and he just does all the dirt. And apparently, this was an interesting story that they told during one of the broadcasts. He's really beloved by his teammates to the point that they were in Milwaukee. He's from that area. I guess it was this year. They wanted to retire his number at his high school. The entire team gets in a bus, goes to his high school.
Oh, I think great. I didn't hear anything about that.
I think that really speaks well of them and him. You know,
and that makes me think. There's sort of an assumption that the Warriors have not gotten along the last year and a half or so, right?
Kind of David West kind of said that after they won the title last year.
Yeah, and I think there's probably some truth to it. But on the other hand, I mean, here's Curry and Iguodala walking off the court with Durant all the way to the line, just following him.
Yes.
I mean, neither of them were in the game at the time, of course. I mean, they were both on the bench, but. And this the GM is in tears at this press conference. I mean, I don't know. I
think that's fair.
They're like a family.
I think that's fair. I mean, it's like one of those things: which came first, the success or the togetherness, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, okay, there's been this to-do about Durant's injury, about whether the team did him dirty by having him play or letting him play, or however you want to phrase it. And then today, after his surgery, on Instagram, he comes out and says, I wanted to be there for my brothers the other night, and I'm rooting hard for them in Game 6. So if there is any hard feeling, it's certainly not between Durant and the other guys on the team.
Yeah.
If there's any hard feeling, which we don't know at all, it's between some other element of the team, the medical staff or whatever.
Yeah.
So, which, you can, if you want to read into the fact that he went to get a second opinion in New York, maybe that is where his hard feeling is. But whatever.
Yeah.
Now
here's the other thing. We both love Steve Kerr. Is this going to haunt him?
I don't know. He was interesting because after the game, he kind of washed his hands of it.
Yeah. I think that was probably they huddled together outside and said, "You're not going to talk about this."
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things. It's like you could go. There's dozens of examples of this, of how the team needs to save the player from himself.
Yeah.
And this is probably another one of them. At the same time, there was all that. There was a story, in fact, it might have been on The Athletic, about how there was impatience on the part of the team leading into Game 5. And the team didn't do anything to quash that. You would think that they would come out vehemently and say, no, that's not the case. This is all BS. But there was none of that. So,
and even some suggestions that the players were saying, we're all hurt. Why can't he, which I don't know, have no idea if that's true. It wouldn't surprise me if it isn't. But there, again, narratives do 180-degree flips in one day, in one game, again and again and again.
A week ago, we were talking about Andre Iguodala in the Hall of Fame.
That's an excellent point. Yeah.
It's like there's been a different narrative following every game in the series. Like the first game, Pascal Siakam is a deity. Second game, Andre Iguodala is going to the Hall of Fame. Third game, it was Steph having to play like LeBron with no help. And the fourth game was Kawhi Leonard is a major deity.
And tomorrow night, Thursday, there will be many more of these because that's Game 6 and then potentially Game 7 on Sunday, right? Yeah. So we'll soon be done with hoops for the season, and then we'll really have to get creative. But we can do that.
There's free agency.
There's free agency.
Actually, next week is the NBA draft.
Oh, my goodness. I take that back.
Your Sixers have 5 picks.
Yeah, that's right. They
24, 33, 34, 42, and 54.
I don't know if they amount to anything, but there are 5 picks.
It's interesting you say that because BasketballReference.com, they had their draft analysis, and the 24th pick has made an NBA roster 86% of the time. Now, that doesn't mean that, But Kyle Lowry was a 24th pick. Serge Ibaka was a 24th pick.
Serge Ibaka.
So, that's if you could come up with one of those guys, you'd be considering what their bench was like.
That's a big win if they can get a guy, either of those guys.
And 33 and 34, usually you can find a player there too. Usually.
Oh, you're confident, big guy. I like your flowery uplift here.
I'm nothing but a ray of sunshine, Mike.
That's what you're known for. Yeah. All right, gang. It's been fun. Thanks again to Dana O'Neill. Really good. Our guests have been very good, haven't they? Is that an indication that we're bringing out the best in them?
Let's go with that.
Let's go with that. Absolutely. The Twitter feed @BuzzerAfter. The Gmail address where you can email us, afterbuzzer@gmail.com. And you can find this podcast on YouTube if you just look for After the Buzzer. It's been fun, gang. We'll do it again soon. See you later.